Ready to begin? Meeting's being recorded. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is the second meeting in a series of roundtable meeting that we are having with stakeholders and community members interested in housing and housing issue in our city. With me tonight, I have Margarita Macedonio. She will be helping to moderate the meeting. We have Melanie McCann, who is our project manager, and she will be taking and presenting most of the items of tonight's meeting. I have also joining us tonight is our new planning manager, Fabiola Zelaya Meliker. She joined us this week, and she will be working with Melanie on this project as well. Judson Brown, he is with CDA Housing Division, and he'll be part of the presentation tonight. And then we have our interpreter tonight joining us is Nilda Anea. She'll be providing Spanish translation, and our staff will share with you how to get interpretation information as part of this meeting. So tonight is a continuance of the meeting from last Wednesday. Our goal tonight is to share with you, obviously this is a housing update process. So we have a current housing element that has program policies and implementation that has been ongoing. And as part of this process, we'll be looking to update some of that. So tonight, what we want to do is to share with you some of the elements of that housing program and provide an opportunity for us to review some of the successes and as well as discuss any program refinements or any other discussion that the group feel is appropriate for tonight in terms of our review of at least the some segment of that housing element and has become a part of this ongoing roundtable discussion. So with that, I know we want to get into the meat of tonight's discussion. So Melanie, are you ready?
I'll start before Melanie starts. Para los que hablan español, tenemos interpretación disponible. Aquí tenemos las instrucciones. So we're just letting people know that these are the instructions for accessing the Spanish interpreting feature for tonight. And also for those, if we do have any monolingual Spanish speakers who want to share, for those who do not understand Spanish, you'll have the opportunity to access the English Zoom option so that you can listen to the simultaneous interpreting while the Spanish speakers sharing. So we just wanted to make that reminder. Next, Alyssa. So these are just reviewing the ways that you can participate during the meeting. You can raise your hand. You can also ask a question on the Q&A box as an option. And also for those of you, I see that we have one person participating by phone. For that and others who join by phone, if you want to raise your hand when we have an opportunity to take any questions, please make sure to press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute yourself so that you can be able to speak when we call on you. I think that's all. Okay, Melanie.
Oh, thank you, Margarita.
Okay.
Thank you. And so we can't really see everyone's faces, but you can see us. And it looks like there's about 23 people with us. So thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to be part of the conversation. As we mentioned last time, this is a great opportunity to gather representatives from our local community serving organizations, residents, and our housing industry partners to all come together and share their experiences, which will assist city staff in the beginning stages of pulling together policies and programs and getting ready for our wider community outreach. And great opportunity as well for all of us to get to know each other just a little bit better and keep building those relationships to help promote housing to serve our community. So again, welcome. And tonight, we're going to be talking about one area of our housing program. So as most of you know, in a housing element, there's a lot of background information. So we really understand what is our community, what is the need. We will evaluate constraints, we'll evaluate resources and land that's there. But tonight, we're going to talk about the category of housing and livable neighborhoods. So each of you got an email yesterday, which you may or may not have had an opportunity to look at, but it provided an excerpt from our housing plan. And the housing plan includes 56 different objectives or measures. And these are just, the section we're going to talk about tonight is about 15 of those 56. So we wanted to walk you through them, and they're in the category of housing rehabilitation, neighborhood initiatives, community building initiatives, code enforcement, and historic preservation. And then we'll end the meeting with some dialogues about our next steps. So what I'll be doing is I'll go through, before we get into those different categories, I wanted to just share, when everyone was introduced last time, they were asked to share what housing meant to them. And so these were the words that came together. So stability was a big item, community, opportunity, equity, and a whole number of things. So again, thank you for sharing your perspective in the introductions. So I will now just take a few minutes to go through one of the categories of our housing plan. So the idea is tonight we'll go over some of our housing programs that are in the existing general plan that have been steering us for the last 8 years. And the idea is for you to become familiar with them, and then as well to identify your experiences with those programs. If there's anything that you think might need to be changed, refined, or added, just based on your experiences. So the first category is housing rehabilitation, and there's 3 components to that. So here we have an excerpt. So these are the 3 actual programs in our general plan. And the objectives of each of these programs, essentially all of these, are to provide low interest loans for lower income households or potentially seniors to allow for rehabilitation and improvement of homes. The right column here, just as some highlights of what was accomplished in the last year. So for instance, in the single family rehabilitation program, we had 4 applications approved in 2020, and 3 homes actually were repaired the year before. So you can see it's pretty straightforward. It's the basics of housing rehabilitation to keep our housing stock in good condition. And I would offer Judson, Judson Brown of our housing manager is also with us tonight. So at any point, Judson, feel free to jump in if you'd like. The other thing I'd like to note as we go through these, this particular topic does not have any state law that we want to bring to your attention that would might affect these programs. But as we move forward for the next couple of meetings, we will be highlighting some various legislation that might require us to change and adapt our programs a bit. So with that, what I'd like to do is for each of these categories to then open up for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the topic. And again, ask if just these basic objectives under rehabilitation, is there anything that you would offer to add or change or just leave things as they are? So it's kind of an open-ended question, but if we could, if anyone would like to raise their hand or put a comment in the chat, we'll start with that.
Okay, so we have Carl Benninger. Go ahead, Carl.
Good evening, everybody. My first response is to look at only 7 homes and 2 mobile homes in a whole year.
Mhm.
I kind of wonder whether how well we're doing to publicize this sort of information. So the only thing that I would add right now is, what are we doing to let people know that these programs are available?
Mhm. Good question. Judson, are you with us? Marguerite, if you can,
Yes, he's here. Go ahead, Judson.
okay.
Yeah, thank you, Carl, for that comment. The program actually has been on hold since the beginning of the pandemic last March, and we had reassigned. We had to reassign the staff who was administering our single-family rehabilitation program and mobile home rehabilitation program to administer our emergency rental assistance program. And so we haven't had the chance to market the program since the beginning of the pandemic last March. Now, speaking from our experience prior to that, our marketing efforts really were, I'd say, lackluster. We marketed the program, but through putting information up on our webpage and providing flyers in our lobby. But beyond that, we didn't make any substantial efforts to market the program further than that.
Judson, I have
Yeah, good
a
opportunity.
comment by Gina Scott from HomeAid. She wanted to know how many opportunities are available each year for these programs.
Great question, Gina. It is actually in regards to the amount of funding that we provide. And so I can tell you that we have not gotten anywhere close to the amount of funding we provide for the program each year to the number of applications that we actually fund and administer. So I'll give you an example. Every year we provide CDBG program funds and home program funds for these 2 programs. And every year we substantially underspend that amount.
Judson, I'd like to keep it moving to Paula. She has a question or a comment. Go ahead, Paula.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing this information. Given that the money is always underspent, and given what Judson just shared about, marketing being lackluster, I would propose that there be, a more strategic plan around marketing this more efficiently, kind of like the way the vaccines were, a CARES program saves, moving it into even working with the school district to make it possible so that more families are aware of these loans, of these no interest loans. So that's just my comment and my proposal. Thank you.
Thank you,
Judson,
Paola.
I wanted to interject for a moment. Judson, is there not some other, as well as far as besides marketing, reasons why the program doesn't have as many applications? I know it's targeted for lower income, but are there also some other restrictions in the program, like needing to use certain types of contractors that also are factors?
Really, no. I think much of the fact that we haven't been able to fully expend the funds that we've allocated to these programs has to do with the lack of marketing. And then the second is for the rental rehabilitation program that you see here on the screen, that program actually has never had a successful application for it. Since at least over the last 10 years. So that program is for multifamily housing properties. And it's different from our single family home rehabilitation program, which provides up to $75,000 per property. We've tried, as Barry can attest, right? We tried to really heavily market that program in different neighborhoods, and have found that landlords who own multifamily housing properties that are in need of repair, that are in need of improvement, they aren't willing to receive these funds because of the additional restrictions and affordability restrictions that come with these funds. And overall, I would say our rental rehabilitation program is it's not well designed, and it ends up we've again, over the last 10 years, we've never had an approved application for our multi-family rental rehabilitation program, which is different than our single family home rehabilitation program and our mobile home rehabilitation.
Thank you,
Thanks, Justin.
Justin. I'd like to move forward with the group if that's okay. We have some more ideas, recommendations. Mireya is suggesting on the chat, she believes the objective should be to have no interest for some of these low interest loans, maybe no interest, especially given the housing crisis that's we've experienced so far. So thanks, Mireya, for that recommendation. We have Isuri Ramos, Commissioner Ramos. Can the city capitalize on the new relationships it has developed with multifamily rental property owners that participated in the CARES rental assistance program for their tenants? So that's another one. Great recommendation. And question, actually. So would that be possible, Judson? Is that?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Ramos, for that recommendation. The honest truth, if you ask Hilda, who's on the roundtable, on our roundtable, and others who are administering the assistance, is that I would say in general, we're not really building relationships with landlords through our emergency rental assistance program. We have a lot of difficulty in actually getting information from landlords to actually assist their tenants. You would think it would be otherwise, that landlords would be really actively trying to pursue assistance for their tenants and working collaboratively with us. But that's actually not the case. But I think in terms of I would definitely say in terms of the database of landlords that we have in our files is growing for us to reach more landlords with the information, for sure. That for sure is a resource that's growing. But in terms of those relationships, I wouldn't say that we're able to capitalize on those relationships. It's very difficult working with landlords in our community to get the assistance that their tenants need.
Okay, so thank you, Judson. We're going to take, I see a hand raised from Irlanda Martinez.
Hi, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I had mentioned at the last meeting about us exploring like an ADU program. I guess this is more of a question about whether rehab funding can be used to bring structures that are not licensed up to code in order to be able to count them for affordable housing on our housing element. Yeah, so I guess it's like a question slash comment.
So you mentioned the word ADU, so I'm gonna try this. So Justin, if it was a garage, for instance, that they were looking for some support funding to get permits for that garage to be a bona fide 8 accessory dwelling unit, would any of these funding sources be an opportunity for the single family rehab?
You know, thank you so much, Orlando, for that recommendation. It's what we see in our experience generally is that single-family homeowners who apply for this program, and generally they don't have an ADU to improve on their property. And so if you're a homeowner with an ADU on your property, it's possible you may not income qualify for this program since it's restricted for low-income families. But with that said, we don't have any specific product. No, I'm sorry. So the short answer is it's yes, but. So it's yes, but not very many families would likely income qualify for this program. And yes, but if a family has an ADU, they actually income qualify and they have an ADU that is in a dilapidated state and needs repair, then it's only $75,000. And when you start breaking down $75,000 is, Barry can attest, right? And others can attest who are in the construction field. It doesn't go very far if the house, the single family home itself on the property needs improvement. So there's that balance as well. And the funds have to, they can't be, the funds that we use, we have to address all deficiencies and prioritize the deficiencies in the property. We can't just ignore deficiencies in the main property and say, we're gonna improve the ADU. That's not something we would have the authority to do. We would have to improve the deficiency in the main property as well as deficiencies that could be added to the budget for the ADU as well, if that makes sense. But the short answer is yes. It's just yes, but would the homeowner income qualify? And yes, but does the the main property have deficiencies that exist for it?
Thank you, Judson. Just a clarification from Mireya. When you were talking about the rental rehabilitation, she wanted to know if you can specify a little bit more those restrictions. It's the 55-year, making it affordable. Is that what it was?
You got it. Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Okay.
It's the 55. It's a 55-year covenant that's applied to the property, and actually, yeah, it's 55 years, and then it restricts, the rents have to be restricted for the tenants in the property. So once a multifamily housing property owner gets into the details, right, most would see it like they look at it, they say, oh, $75,000 and a low interest rate for my multifamily housing property. Some look into that and they're like, okay, that sounds great. But then when they get into the details of realizing that it places affordability restrictions on their property, and it places income limits on their future tenants, then they realize, hey, they're not interested in that federal source of funding to rehab their property. Really,
Okay.
I would say the program needs to be revamped as a whole to probably triple or quadruple the amount of funding available for those properties, so that we could actually get qualified multifamily housing properties to apply and be interested in the property and redesign it.
Thank you, Judson, and thanks for being so candid just about your observations and insights about the program. Would like to move on to Carla's comment requesting a tenant opportunity to purchase act section, especially those for tenants who have been long-term tenants and absentee landlords. So she's looking at, for example, what's being done in DC and for multi-family units that may become a cooperative. So that's a recommendation, a program recommendation that Carla's making. I would like to move on to the hands raised. Cesar Covarrubias.
Thank you. Actually, my question was already brought up and answered, and my comments are already addressed. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Melanie?
Yes? No, I just did things.
Oh,
We-
okay.
Are we ready
just-
to?
I think I think we've gotten sufficient feedback, I think, for now to get a sense, because I know there are some other programs that are related to housing that
Very
would
good.
proceed. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks. I think we have some ideas brewing for what we can do to, as Justin says, revamp a few things to improve them. So thank you. The next general category in programs that we wanted to touch on is the category of neighborhood initiatives. So I'll be touching on 3 specific programs that were entitled Neighborhood Improvements, Neighborhood Infrastructure, and Healthy Neighborhood Initiatives. So again, I'll walk through these briefly. So these are 3 that are in our housing plan right now. So neighborhood improvement is synonymous with Margarita Macedonia and Alyssa Ventura. But it's the support that we give to our neighborhood associations. It's supporting our community linkage forum and other type forums, and our community resource network to train and equip more residents to be leaders in the community and support their neighborhood endeavors. The next number 5 here is neighborhood infrastructure. It's that idea to be a complete neighborhood. We also need to have complete infrastructure improvements and work within the capital improvement plan that's approved by council to work in that direction, and to seek funds to improve the infrastructure, specifically with the lens of health and wellness. And on the right again, the status, what were we able to achieve in that area over the last year or so? Well, we're very fortunate for over $8 million was expended to reconstruct a number of miles of local streets and arterials in the city. And we've been able to continue to implement what's called the city's active transportation plan for pedestrian and bike improvements, and also the Safe Route to Schools plan, moving forward on some of those efforts. And then the third one that's under the neighborhood initiatives grouping is focus on healthy neighborhoods. And that goes from an action of implementing what's been framed as the Santa Ana Green Program, where there's more tree planting, green up the corridors, energy conservation, and then also collaborating with our community partners to promote healthy initiatives. And then to the right, some of the actions associated with that are our city's recycling program as far as green and helping the environment, and their newsletter that goes out, and then retrofitting some of the city facilities to be more energy efficient and be a leader in that area. Again, there's no state legislative requirements that would impact these programs, but we again would like to open up this discussion for those that have some thoughts about what are we doing well, what could be revamped, do we have some new ideas as it relates to neighborhood initiatives? Margarita?
Yes, so we have a comment from Carla, and I know she's brought that up before at the Comlink meetings, that there's a Facebook page and it's not being monitored or up to date, that the last post was on April 5th, and to please have it removed or monitored with up-to-date information about the upcoming meetings. And so I know that the city it's not the city's Facebook, so we'll definitely work with the Comlink board I think George Collins has offered to update it, because it was created by some of the resident leaders who are either formerly Comlink board members. But thank you, Carla. That's always a great reminder. Do we have anybody who would like to speak regarding these programs, or, as Melanie was saying, other ideas? The group had great ideas for the housing program, so.
Looks like Carl has his hand raised.
Oh, he does. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie.
You're
Go ahead,
welcome.
Carl.
Unless it's an old raised hand. But
No.
I'm sorry. I just forgot to unmute myself. But
perfect.
I'm very sensitive because I do have solar power in my house. I absolutely love it. I have trouble explaining to people that the payback time frame and what have you. And it's one thing I see lacking in the city is lack of solar power, both on its own buildings. And so that's why this energy retrofit is interesting. And so I would really love to see something in this area where we're encouraging more solar power, use of solar power, even electrical vehicles for that matter. And I do have a Prius, and again, I very much end up enjoying that. And so when we say energy retrofit, those are things I would like to see more of in the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you, Carl. Do we have any other thoughts? From the
Margarita
team?
and Melanie, maybe to help the group and for some of us who are newer to the city and understanding the neighborhood initiative program, what you may want to talk about is how this program works and how this relates to improving neighborhoods and improving of housing, but also how it relate to attainment of affordable housing in the city, and that would maybe help spark some of the conversation. And
Sure.
Sure.
Yes.
Margarita,
So
would you like to share?
yes. So very briefly, the neighborhood improvement, it's called neighborhood initiatives now. The focus is to work with neighborhood leaders, emerging leaders, in terms of the support that they need to get things going at a neighborhood level, whether it's different events that they want to do or have some greater discussions and strengthen relationships with different city departments when there is outreach on a different project, infrastructure and housing, an affordable housing project. And now there's some requirements to have some earlier meetings with the developer, and also just to be in tune with, how that is going to affect you and how you as residents and resident leaders have an opportunity to comment and sort of keep involved in the process as it continues to land on the Planning Commission agenda or on the City Council agenda. That is the intent, to have some earlier outreach on that. And so that is like one example of the way that our program works. In addition, we have some areas we call as hotspots. So they're a little bit more challenging in terms of the density and some of the crime and some of the safety issues that come up. So, our team is also working with the city departments and even other outside agencies to try to improve the responsiveness that's happening in the community, so that, it's safer, and we have, residents that are getting improved services, and they're able to clearly communicate, their issues a little bit more and get their issues resolved to the extent that it can be. And then, the third component is it's sort of like this array of a lot of community organizations that have an interest in serving the Santa Ana community. So it's like, more of a wider scale, impactful way of connecting with them and partnering on different programs, whether it be like a leadership program, or let's say with the vaccines, partnering with the schools and the neighborhoods, or a church in a neighborhood, to be able to have an impact at a grassroots level on how residents can benefit most out of this. And we also, we've worked with, some of you who are on this call as well, to just try to accomplish more with the resources that we have to get a lot of more interest, from a neighborhood level.
Margarita, before Melanie goes in, I'd like to maybe explore that a little bit further. So how does this program, and you may not deal directly with affordable housing issues. However, in your program where you work with neighborhood to improve the livability, to improve housing conditions, to make sure that there is adequate representation, to make sure that there's equity and parity in certain areas that is underrepresented. How does that help to promote, housing and housing, in the city?
Yes. So our program is about leveling the playing field. I mean, it really is. And that's part of what equity means in terms of a lot of times we have neighborhoods that are challenged. And so residents do not know how to communicate with the city, right? So they don't know how to call, or let's say they don't get through, they're monolingual Spanish speaker and there's just an issue. So our office gets a lot of phone calls. And so it could be a code enforcement issue, a quality of life. We have, it could be a scenario where the family can't even live at that house and they need to know how they can get assistance. And so we're trying to be the connectors and at the same time, keep track and making sure that they know that, we're going to follow up on it and sharing the tools on how to also report other city issues so that their immediate unit is safe to live in, but also their neighborhood is getting addressed and getting attention. So that's part of it. And that's like one example, but on the affordable housing side, I mean, we've worked with, and I'm just gonna call out in a positive way, Barry Cottle, who's on the call, because we've looked at some of the areas where we've had affordable housing built and looking at opportunities where we can have a learning center on site so that the immediate neighborhood can benefit from that service and they have access, and we'll partner with the CBO. And the one that comes to mind, Barry, is the KidWorks Learning Center on Townsend Street that we were able to creatively, figure out a way to get this unit that was not permitted, and we sort of worked around on how we can make it work. And so now you had, a place, that the neighborhood can access those services, and that came out of this affordable housing project. Likewise, in other areas, the benefit of the affordable housing, the community benefit in terms of this center becomes a place of services, of gathering and resource access, so we can do a lot more and build upon that. So that's sort of the connection to the community building work that can happen.
Thank you, Margarita. And that's an excellent point, because I think for many of us on this call who doesn't deal directly with this program, it is a program that's unique to Santa Ana, and it's a capacity building neighborhood empowerment program, and how it linked to affordable, decent, attainable housing was not so obvious until you described it. So I think hopefully with that, we can help spark some conversation about how this program moving into the next housing cycle, how this program can continue to build on what we have done so far and other areas that we should be engaging in that can help the community with housing and housing issues.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Ben.
Margaret.
You're welcome. So let's see. I saw Barry had his hand raised earlier, and then he raised it down, and then he raised it back. So go ahead, Barry. Go ahead, Barry.
Am I unmuted now? I'm sorry.
You are.
Oh, good. Thank you. Margarita, you and Justin both explained it, and Melanie, of course, and you brought up about KidWorks. The other good example, I think, under the neighborhood infrastructure and neighborhood improvement is our Cornerstone community. And that back in the late 1990s and 1980s, it was just probably the highest crime rate in the city and one of the top 3 in Orange County. And today it's not even on that list anymore for code enforcement and for police, but it really did make those changes for people. It's a safe community now. There's learning centers, there's after school programs, there's a police substation over there, and that's all done through that neighborhood infrastructure, neighborhood improvements. And if you recall, with the city's cooperation, very, very much, we could not have done it without all these programs. It was all 1-bedroom units, 527 1-bedroom units. Now there's 2- and 3-bedroom units over there. It was heavily, heavily overcrowded. I think the worst we had was just lots of people living in 1-bedroom units that are now we're living in 3-bedroom units. So it can make a difference, is what it does. It makes it a great place. People want to say now they live on Cornerstone. When it was known as Mini Street, people wanted to not even say where they lived. They were, it was a scary place for a number of years. But the neighborhood infrastructure, the neighborhood improvement really does work. But it definitely takes a partnership and a teamwork. in what you guys are doing and what we can all do also.
Thank you, Barry. Let's go to Mireya. Go ahead, Mireya.
Oh, hello. I had I guess, a comment or question or for the one that's number 4, the program neighborhood improvement. I do see that on the side of the status, it says, for example, neighborhood meetings that have evolved into virtual meeting. And thanks for having bilingual interpretation services. And also, I want to add, I know right now it's virtual, but maybe later on it's not going to be virtual. It could be also in person. They should add also childcare for residents, that if they do show up to the meeting, there's childcare there. And for the neighborhood infrastructure, I know you guys mentioned about that the city has been adding more bike lanes. Yeah, I kind of question some of the bike lanes because I feel that the bike lanes are too wide for the streets that they're putting them on, and the streets are not that big, and barely a car fits in there. So I feel that maybe the bike lane shouldn't be that wide. And I noticed, for example, down on Main Street, I know there's a lot of construction going on, and I see that on Main Street, they're putting like a curved cement on the parking that I guess cars could park, but I guess they're putting that curved cement like on the red zone. So I don't know what is the purpose of doing that. To me, I feel like that's the waste of money. And also I feel that maybe small cars could fit in there, but yet not all cars are the same. We all have different types of cars. Some of us have big trucks, and I feel that that cement that they're putting could affect maybe a car that could probably fit there, and maybe with that won't fit there anymore.
So I imagine you're talking about some of the improvements on as part of the South Main corridor. So we could follow up with you most certainly, but it sounds like you might be talking about a bulb out where they kind of pop out the corners on the streets. So it's intended to make it more pedestrian friendly and more comfortable. But there's always some trade-offs. So it sounds like this, what you're describing, the trade-off is some amount of reduction in parking, but happy to follow up with you. And as well, a little more explanation with our public works folks. Typically they have a wider bike lane because those bikers are more at risk than somebody that's in a car. So, but we're happy to follow up with you on that.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Melanie, to connect her with Public Works also. And we have someone who's on the Spanish interpreting. She completely agrees with the changes on the streets, with like Mireya's comment about it could be a protected lane, it could be a bulb out that's sort of making it more difficult from their experience. So thank you. Gracias, Marisela. Okay, so I just wanted to note that we're at 6:20.
Very good.
And we still have some other programs, so maybe we can, and we have 3 hands raised. So I just wanted to call attention to Irlanda's comment, and it would be cool to have a composting program. Maybe the city can partner with some of the local community gardens, also local organizations like Latino Health Access have a lot of experience training resident leaders. The city could look for partnerships with them or hire nonprofits, with this expertise as consultants. And yes, great suggestion, Irlanda. Very much appreciate that. And then we have one last comment before we go to the hands raised by Marisela. La verdad, okay, the truth is that it doesn't help our city that there's no parking on the streets. And with these changes, it's affecting our neighbors. So it's back to Mireya's point on the bulb outs, the bike lanes, anything that's sort of taking parking away. So thank you. Gracias, Marisela. All right, so let's go to the hands raised. We'll call on Caesar, Carl, and then Carla. So go ahead, Caesar.
Great, thank you. Yes, on neighborhood infrastructure and improvements, I'm wondering to what extent that takes into consideration seeking additional funding that's related to development. So for an example, with affordable housing developments, there's a connection to parks money at the state level, and there's also infrastructure investment dollars through the Sustainable Community Strategies funding and other state programs. Is that an objective that we can put into the requirement, pardon me, the initiatives and the programs that we would be seeking that type of funding?
We certainly can. And you're wanting to particularly call out some specific opportunities like the Sustainability Community Strategy funds?
Correct, yeah, so the Sustainable Community, and I know that the city is doing that, some of that work with some nonprofits, and but I think if we're intentional about it and we put it in there, other folks may also catch
Right.
on to that.
Right.
Thank you, Caesar. And I think what we can summarize this as is to seek funding to support for infrastructure that would support development of housing, so that way when housing is developed, these areas of infrastructures have been addressed and does not impose additional costs to the development process. Does that capture it, Caesar?
I think it's part of it, but I also want to make sure that we don't lose the opportunity to be able to access those funds when at least when affordable housing developments happen, you have the opportunity to access those specific funds. I'm not aware of any other sources that are out there, but we just need to be intentional that if there are areas where we're looking for development of affordable housing, that we're also connecting the infrastructure needs, and we are talking to the state and everybody else to make sure that we're trying to identify those resources.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Caesar. All right, go ahead, Carl.
Okay, good evening again to everyone. I just want to point out that due to the pandemic, we really have not had the leadership courses that we normally have in the last 2 years. And we definitely need it in the city. If it's one thing that improves a neighborhood, it's people in the neighborhood knowing how to access the city, knowing how to get services. In my neighborhood alone, we just had a dumpster day, which was very successful, but it got people together again after being apart.
Is that you, Carl?
Yes, it was. I'm sorry, I didn't unplug it. But I just want to point that out, that maybe one of our goals out of this program is to be sure that now that we're through the pandemic, that we are going to encourage that these meetings be held again, leadership meetings be held again. And I know in Comlink, we're looking forward to August 15th, holding our first in-person meetings. We hope we can make that date. But this again encourages involvement from the people, and that's how you make it where people want to stay in the neighborhood. Thus, they are willing to put their money into their neighborhoods. And we've seen things here in Metro Classic, exactly that. People that want to stay, move in, homes turn over quickly, and people have them, maintain them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Carla. Go ahead, Carla.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Carla Juarez, longtime resident. So I think that this would fall under all three: neighborhood improvement, neighborhood infrastructure, and a healthy neighborhood initiative to create more community land trusts, like the one with Thrive Santa Ana. For those of y'all that don't know, just Google Thrive Santa Ana. They have one of the first community land trusts from the public land that the city has in Walnut and Daisy, where they're building a community microfarm. Also a community space for the neighborhood to use, and opportunities for worker-owned cooperatives to rent space there. So a community land trust, I think, will fall on either of those three categories and is very healthy for the community because it involves the community. Like the residents are involved in the decision making. Thrive Santana has held community meetings, does door knocking, survey. So the people around that empty lot, which we know Santa Ana has a lot of, decide what they want to see, and that empty lot in Dar Santana has helped them accomplish that. Well, right now it's only been Walnut and Daisy, but I think that would be very healthy for the community. Thank you.
I think, thank you very much, Carla. And actually, you're sort of triggering a segue to the next few policy programs. So if it's all right, if I can transition to the next category, which actually touches on the land trust. It's a little bit broader. It's building community initiatives. And in the general plan, 8 years ago, we introduced a program that connected to Santa Ana building healthy communities, building community efforts, and neighborhood safety. So the first one actually relates to the program related to Santa Ana building healthy communities. And the objective was to support healthy communities by attending their meetings as appropriate, working to achieve mutual goals, forge a comprehensive health agenda for the general plan update. And so when we were looking at, well, have we made some progress on that? What we identified was that in our general plan update, our vision statement and our core values were somewhat informed with participants from that organization, as some of you around the table. And then also acknowledging, continuing to support the community land trust model where it makes the most sense. So, so that's one program. And the other one was building community efforts. And that one talked about seeking grants and partnership opportunities for strategic community investments, which makes me think a little bit of what Cesar brought up, but maybe strengthening it and acknowledging that connection for certain funds that are connected to affordable housing. And then continuing strategic investments in parks, recreation, access to food, routes to school, those sorts of things that really build community. And then we gave an example of a 93 unit affordable project where there was active transportation infrastructure and transit amenities that completed that helped with that. And then as well, another community or partnership is working with the county to construct some affordable housing projects. So those are just two examples that helped activate that objective or put it into action. And then the last program had to do with neighborhood safety, which is critical. And the objective was to support efforts to improve and maintain a healthy and safe neighborhood, and then to apply what's called crime prevention through environmental design. So as the city's reviewing development projects, to use that design guideline, particularly with multifamily residential projects, to encourage safety. And then the action, of course, is that our police department and city planners use those tools to make sure that as best we can to design it up front so it reduces potential for crime and such. So with that, I'll see if there's some more questions and elaboration again on these that they a little overlap with what we were just talking about some, but if there's some comments or suggestions related to these three programs, we invite your thoughts and experiences. Margarita, do we have any hands raised or any comment?
Not yet, but I know that Carla had brought up the community land trust model, so we already see that as
Right.
listed.
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, anyone that's a part of the Santa Ana Building Healthy Communities, if it's time to reinvent that particular program or build on it or refocus it, open to suggestions and ideas.
Okay. And we do have a comment on this slide by Irlanda. Can we get some info on how the city has supported the CLT model and what it would mean to continue to support it? So that's one question.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a couple of hands raised, just so.
So Judson, are you still with us?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thanks. So has your staff had any recent involvement in the Community Land Trust dialogues?
Yeah, I guess I could summarize, try and summarize some of our efforts. The Walnut and Daisy property, the ground lease with Thrive Santa Ana fell under our community development agency, and we've been actively, our staff have been actively supporting them to develop the microfarm on that property.
Mhm.
And then we attended a Thrive Santa Ana conference and spoke at their conference about 2 years ago. I think, Melanie, you also spoke at that conference and attended that conference with me. About 3 years ago, we researched with our city attorney's office about joining the board of Thrive Santa Ana, but we were not able to join the board of Thrive Santa Ana because of a conflict of interest of the city joining their board. We have met occasionally with their director every so often regarding grant opportunities. And most recently, we provided a letter of support for a grant that Thrive Santa Ana applied for through SCAG, and they were awarded those funds with our letter of support. Let's see here.
Those are some good examples.
Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jackson.
All right, so we'll go to Mireya on the hands raised to start off, then Barry, then Celica, and then Commissioner Ramos.
For the buildings community efforts, it says there continue to investments in parks. As far as investments in parks, I live in the area where Memorial Park, and since I was born and raised here in Santana, I never seen any get renovated, especially the restrooms in the Memorial Park. And I know Memorial Park, it has a lot of sports there, especially when it's football, baseball, and they also have their cheerleaders. And yet the restrooms are not that good, to be honest with you. So I wonder, when can those be renovated or fixed to better standards? Especially that we do have a lot of children and adults that go there a lot.
Thank you. We'll follow up and connect with Parks and Recreation to have you connect on that.
And just one comment on that, Mireya, is that the city or through Parks, they resubmitted an application for state funding to include a new community center at Memorial Park. And so, yes, you know, at the neighborhood meetings, we've heard well and plenty about what happens near the restrooms and how people feel unsafe, you know, at their own park. And so, you know, we also have the Parks Master Plan opportunity that is going to help design. So I know Memorial Park is on the map, but yes, and I would enjoy following up with you to get you connected with the neighborhood meetings once we start having them for your neighborhood. Thank you. Barry? Go ahead, Barry.
Got it. Hey, there's a lot of things, good things are being talked about, big things, all kinds of things, but a small thing that we did before the pandemic that I know Judson was involved in, and I think Margarita, either you or Scott Kuttner at the time, but over in our Towns and Rake community where we did affordable housing, but we also had a lot of other neighbors. We met with King Gominski from the police department in their conference room with all the neighbors, and we probably had an 80% turnout of owners. And these are 10-unit buildings, so we had a lot of smaller owners. But we talked about code enforcement. We talked with the code enforcement was there and the police, as I started to say, but we talked about simple things like light bulbs working. This has to do with the neighborhood safety, because there'd be so many lights that were burned out that were owners' responsibilities. We talked about cutting back shrubs in front of windows and doors to help the police drive down the street. But I think it really, in our Townsend Rate neighborhood, it really made a big difference. And we heard from a lot of the neighbors, because there was some fairly heavy crime, going back 6 or 7 years ago in that neighborhood, and it's much better now. But I think if we can, after the pandemic, we can get back to some of those smaller things that don't cost a lot of money, they don't take a lot of work, but we can start those again and keep working at those things.
Thank you, Barry. And that does bring question to the interagency team model that Barry's bringing up, because it first started out as like city, driven, but it expanded to include, residents, who have credibility in the area, property owners, but even to the point for the Townsend Rate model, it included KidWorks. And so it even sort of segmented into like a community building, ongoing, sustainable model, like probably through just before the pandemic. So yeah, I know that just in other areas like Cedar Evergreen, that's been something to bring up that our that the city administration is looking at. So thanks, Barry. Let's see, we have Celica Diaz. Oh, she's joining us. Celica, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Right.
So I was thinking about, number 8 that says building community efforts and seek partnership opportunities. What is the partnership or collaborations that you have with the school district over at Willard? What do you name it? The city and the district. Perhaps we can extend the same model over to the Walker and Roosevelt area, because it has a lot of open land and open space that it's not being used. Or we can also model it at Santa Ana High School, or perhaps we can have the neighbors to have access to the track and also add some exercise equipment. Or we can do it also at Spurgeon or there are many other schools that have a lot of space that perhaps if we build a collaboration or a bridge for community and, and the school to use it, it's gonna be very helpful.
Thank you, Celica. And yes, you're speaking of the joint use agreement.
Yes.
And I thank you, Commissioner Ramos. Actually, Commissioner Ramos, I know you had your hand raised earlier, and I know you've included information on the chat, but if I'd like to give you the floor for a little bit. Let's see where, yes, go ahead, Isuri. Commissioner Ramos. Okay, maybe she's having some audio issues. So what she's shared with the group on the chat is program number 7, the Santa Ana Building Healthy Communities, should be revisited to see how it can be updated and improved to support SABHC and its mission. It may be difficult to propose alternative language right now on such short notice. So Commissioner Ramos is just recommending that all staff follow up with SABHC staff after this discussion to provide more time. So, and she's having audio issues. So, all right. So we'll take one more hand raised and then we'll continue, Melanie, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, go ahead. Let's see. Mireya.
This would go for the neighborhood safety. I noticed that in some areas of Santa Ana, they put, I don't know what they're called, the ones that you drive in the street and then they has you just kind of go around like in a circle type of deal.
The roundabouts.
Yes, those roundabouts. I think that is kind of a safety issue. I rather see speed bumps instead of that. A lot of the times, again, they're put in streets where the streets are small already, and there's already impact of cars that are parked close to it, that anybody could hit one of those parked cars. So I think that that's like a safety issue. I don't know if we could add I'd rather see speed bumps and get rid of those things, to be honest with you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so Mireya, when we follow up with you in Public Works, I think that's like another topic to bring up because we get different opinions on it. And some are very similar to the one you're sharing. Okay, so Carla, go ahead, Carla.
Thank you. I put it down in the chat just in case. But I
Okay.
would like to request, Thrive Santa Ana is one of, I think it's the only community land trust, but I am not sure. But I would like to request that the city works directly with Thrive Santa Ana to establish a specific but attainable program regarding community land trust model.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Carla. All right, Melanie, let's take it
All right.
back to you.
Thank you very much. So our next topic is code enforcement. And so this section of our existing housing plan touches on property maintenance standards, proactive rental enforcement program, and our residential response team. So some of you might be familiar with these programs. The first one, the property maintenance standards, part of what's been identified is for that, for staff to evaluate the appropriateness of healthy housing standards and keep apprised of best industry standards to achieve those sorts of things, and to coordinate the existing proactive rental reinforcement program. And then I'll go over to the status part of it. So our code enforcement continues to collaborate with the city attorney's office and the police department to serve land use violations that are related to making properties healthier and livable. And then as well, the code enforcement also provides some amount of marketing regarding the city's loan program for residents that have notices that need some improvements. And then the next item is what we call is the PREP program. And the objective, a numerical objective, was to inspect 1,600 rental units a year. And then I confirmed that these are brought into compliance with city's codes and standards. And then also to work with the county health department related to infestation violations and streamline solutions. So as far as what the outcome was, at least for last year, was that we actually did reached our goal and were able to inspect over 1,700 rental units. And that translated to 30 permits being issued of a $44,000 violation, but basically to improve those conditions that were not safe and to code. And then the last one, again, is similar to inspect houses for compliance. And that has a slightly different focus to it, but it again achieved its goal, and they continue to do their work to systematically inspect properties, residential properties, and where there needs to be violations issued, do that so that they can be brought into standards and improve that housing stock and improve the quality of life for the folks that are living there. So again, there's no state programs specifically addressing these, but we want to take the opportunity to open it up to the roundtable for any thoughts on things that maybe maybe need a little bit refinement, or that you think are really doing a good service to the community. Whatever thoughts or experiences you have, we'd love to hear them.
Okay, so let's try Commissioner Ramos. Go ahead. She's probably still having audio issues. We can't hear you, Commissioner Ramos. Apologize, we can't hear you. Okay, we're gonna go to someone who's connecting through their cell phone, calling the number. So go ahead. The 949 number. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, this is Dale Heldig, Ward 3. Hopefully we can take a look at the code enforcement guidelines and get it to where for rental properties, commercial properties, code enforcement shouldn't have to go out there half dozen to a dozen times to get things taken care of. Landlords and commercial buildings have the funds or should have the funds to fix an issue within a reasonable period of time. And having code enforcement, like I said, go out there multiple times and not getting any response really shows that the city is not doing all they can to get these problems corrected. So somehow we need to give them a little bit more teeth in their program to allow it to escalate a little bit quicker and get these issues fixed in a timely fashion. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Dale. Okay, let's try Commissioner Ramos. Let's see. All right, Commissioner Ramos. See if we can hear your audio.
Margarita, is there a phone number where she can call in and maybe just speak over the phone? And
Yes.
then I would move on to other.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, she'll call in. She'll call in, so we'll connect her soon. All right, let's move on to Celica Diaz.
Hello again. So I would like to suggest that we have someone from code enforcement attend regularly to the neighborhood meetings to give kind of updates as to, for example, right now, there's a lot of changes with the IDUs in which people can now have additional units on the back of their homes. So a lot of people are kind of getting confused as to the new rules to IUD, what do you call it?
ADU.
ADU, sorry, I just came from the hospital, so I'm kind of like confused. But if they would just give regular updates as to what's up to code or whatnot, and that way we as the residents, can also educate our neighbors and give them more as to where to go in case they need to get a permit, what's permitted and what's not. Because sometimes we do see code enforcement, but we see them not often, like in meetings and honestly, I don't even know now what's legal, what's not legal. So just to kind of be all on the same page, just to show their faces a little bit more so people can get acquainted with them. And also, we can get more answers to many of the questions.
Thank you, Celica. Okay, Carl.
There we go, we're unmuted. Yes, code enforcement. Again, code enforcement has been hurt by the COVID pandemic. It's great to see they did over almost 2,000 rental inspection. That's fantastic. So out of this committee, I really like to see them come back to both their previous numbers of employees, as well as they had a group of volunteers that were also stopped. And I'd like to see that started again. And I'd like to also see the code enforcement emergency rulings that allow food trucks to be everywhere on private property. And we have felt that on Bristol because they start with Bristol, the parking area near Ettinger and Bristol, and that's fine. That's off the beaten path. It doesn't interfere with traffic, and they've done a nice job maintaining it. But now you have a growth by Bristol and Alton, which is partially blocks the street. You also now have them coming into the parking lot across the street from the hospital, which again is interfering with traffic on Bristol. And they're unfortunately leaving that area a mess. So I'd say out of this recommendation, let's go back to our standards we had pre-pandemic, start enforcing them, and ask code enforcement to where their numbers need to be and bring back their voluntary force again. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, I think we have Commissioner Ramos. Let's try. Go ahead, Commissioner Ramos. If you can press *6 on your phone so that you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much for working with me on this. Because we're talking about code enforcement, I wanted to see if this would be a good time to also discuss a proposed zoning ordinance that would require that code enforcement now also make visits to homes that are reported for having more than, I believe it's more than 4 rental leases at a residential address. So I wanted to check with staff if now would be a good time to discuss that, or I don't know if there's plans to discuss it later tonight or at a future roundtable discussion.
I think the appropriate discussion, because the ordinance that you're referring to is still something that's considered and it's not in place. I think the appropriate way to discuss it is how city regulations and housing ordinance intended to enhance housing and how they either have positive or any unintended impacts that should be evaluated. And, so I think it's a more general discussion in that way could be beneficial.
Okay, and so so should it be had right now, today, or at a future roundtable?
This is part of the enforcement discussion.
Yeah.
Enforcement is intended to be a part of making sure that we improve housing condition, making sure that our residents are protected and have a decent, safe, and high quality housing.
Yeah, if you want to like briefly summarize it, and that way we capture it as part of this discussion, as Min is saying.
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask staff if they would feel comfortable providing a brief description of what is being proposed, so then others can share their opinion on it. I don't want to misrepresent what staff is proposing, and I also have opinions of my own that I would like to share.
Well, the ordinance was proposing to evaluate putting into place a definition of what a boarding house is and what it is not. It is intended to ensure that boarding house in the city, when it does operate, that it's either be licensed and be regulated by other agencies for health impacts and other type issues that are regulated outside of the city of Santa Ana's jurisdiction. But where we do have land use jurisdiction, we were looking at how, whether or not the number of rental agreements within a property and how that impacts neighborhood and housing and quality of housing within the neighborhood. And the ordinance was basically proposing that anything above 4 or more rental agreements would be something that would require another level of review, and anything below that would just be considered something that would be permitted in our single family zone. The intent of that is to make sure that we have high quality housing that doesn't impact our residents and the way our residents are dwelling in the city, but also where there are boarding homes that wants to operate and located in the city, that they have the appropriate license requirements so that the clients and people that use those facilities are also having access to high quality housing.
Thank you, Min. Thank you for the description. And I want to say that I raised this as a planning commissioner because this is being considered by the planning commission, and the planning commission requested that it be continued until after these roundtable discussions took place, because the commission also has an interest in understanding the opinions and perspectives of these stakeholders on the issue. And I also want to say that the Planning Commission has raised concerns about how this could jeopardize the makeshift housing, affordable housing that a lot of Santa Ana residents currently have, and that in some ways this could also criminalize poverty. So I share this because I want there to be context on what the Planning Commission has discussed thus far. And I really invite you all to comment on this right now. I wish that there was a slide on this issue, specifically because the Planning Commission is continuing the item until after these discussions. But I invite you all to please share your thoughts on this so that I can take that back to the commission. Thank you.
And Commissioner Ramos, this slide is really intended on the bigger picture, not necessarily to focus on any particular issues, but rather looking at it from a policy base and how code enforcement and some of the effort that we have done in the past contribute to the success of creation, protection, and preservation of affordable housing and improving the housing quality for residents. So the context of code enforcement is, I think it's very appropriate to look at how and ways that code enforcement can be implemented to have positive impact to safe, decent, affordable, high quality housing, and how that can be looked at to minimize the unintended consequence of enforcing the regulations that we do have, whether it's current regulations or future regulations.
Okay, so Commissioner Ramos, I'm going to move to the other hands that are raised. But if you want to raise your hand again, just press *9. Just wanted to let you know. All right, so let's move on to Carla Juarez, and then Irlandia.
Hi, Carla Juarez. I'm in Ward 4. So I do want to comment on the restriction of the number of leases, because whether also like a lot of the languages that y'all are using tonight for a regular Joe Schmo like myself is very complicated. Luckily, and I am calling my privilege, the fact that I've been educated on these languages and had time and access to internet in order to look up some of these have helped. But for a regular person whose policies this will affect their lives and their families is not accessible to understand what is going on. So I did want to mention that the for lease, whether it be for a boarding house or not boarding house, because family will not care, that are renting there, will put them in danger of being evicted. And also the owners, the property owners, are not being held accountable for putting in danger those families. And the property owners most likely will not give a lease out to families or individuals in order for them to continue to receive the same amount of income, which will leave the tenants in even more danger because that tenant will not have a lease. And because this is Santa Ana and our tenants are still here, our residents are here, our neighbors are here, families and friends are here, and they're not leaving, they're fighting and fighting, and the fight continues to stay. They will take that space without a lease because their kids go to school here, their jobs are nearby, medicine, doctors, community, you name it, they're trying to fight in order to stay here. So they'll put their lives at risk, and that property owner will still. But didn't want to mention that, but I did. The reason why I raised my hand was in regards to, again, protecting the tenants and holding the property owners accountable and responsible for maintaining their properties without evicting the tenants. So when the code enforcement goes in, the tenants should be protected and not be put out in the streets if their dwelling is considered like unhealthy or not to standard. And the owners should be responsible for that family and making sure that the family still has the place to live and not leaving them out on the dry. And also like a protection against retaliation. Once the tenant comes back, landlords most of the time increase their rents. And I'm not talking about a 3% like the rent control that is being trying to push, but more like a double the amount of rent. And this hurts the families, and it hurts our kids. There's a lot of harm that is caused going through an eviction and being in danger of being evicted. So if we're talking about healthy families, I say we start from there.
Thank you, Carla. So I think just to sort of summarize everything that you're saying in the context of code enforcement and the programs that are responding to code enforcement so that we have this access to housing is the tenant protection component that you're advocating for. Thank you. Irlanda Martinez.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I don't mean to overextend this this item, but I did want to also highlight that although we do have the responsibility to provide safe and healthy housing, we also have the responsibility to provide housing. And unfortunately for folks that live in boarding housing, they've, you know, sort of like created their own affordable housing. And I think that this can be a testament of the need that Santana residents have. I think that we also need to understand that there's a lot of undocumented folks in this type of housing that if they are, you know, put out in the streets and, you know, not provided with the place to live, they're not going to be able to qualify for a lot of the affordable housing that the city does provide. So, you know, I want to acknowledge that I don't have the answers, but I do want to highlight that this isn't just like a health and safety issue, it's also a housing issue. And this can, well, when this is combined with, you know, a lack of affordable housing development at the right income levels, that it can turn into a really big issue for the city. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Irlanda. Mireya?
I just want to say for where it says when it says that the rental units that has been inspected, what actually gets inspected? Do they go inside of the apartments or is it just outside? I do know that a lot of apartments have a lot of infestation that sometimes during the day you don't see it and it comes out at night. And also a lot of apartments have a lot of mold that sometimes I guess the property owners have some maintenance person who will do kind of I call it what is like a Mickey Mouse type of job, you know, that it's not done properly, yet the mold exists within the walls that affects the families living there. And I also agree with Carla Juarez how there's a lot of property owners not being accountable, being accountable for all this stuff that's going on. And if they do make some of those changes that needs to be changed for better living conditions for the people living there, the owners should not raise the rents for the people living there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mireya. Hilda Ortiz. Go ahead, Hilda, if you want to unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Okay, sorry about that. I think my connection is a little bit unstable. But I mean, I'll keep it brief. Some of what I was going to say has already been shared, so I'll just echo that I agree. I think we've heard that there's plenty of opportunities for improvement for code enforcement to, you know, fulfill in ensuring that we have quality housing for residents. And I think there's opportunities to do that in addressing kind of what was already been said, this fear that our community has sometimes in reporting for fear of retaliation, rent increases, eviction, discrimination on immigration status. So I think, you know, there's opportunities to focus that code enforcement is able to better work with their residents. And so kind of looking at that at the bigger picture with what was proposed in the Planning Commission in terms of the boarding house ordinance, I think that is part of the bigger picture in addressing the lack of affordable housing that we have. And so instead of focusing on an ordinance that could potentially criminalize further the community that we have, then we should focus on improving the code enforcement program to serve the residents.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Hilda. Okay, Melanie, and we did have a comment from the Spanish speaker who thinks that the interpreting is not like fully complete. So I just let them know if they want to, you know, raise their hand, they can. I know we're at 7:08 right now, Melanie, and we still have one more, right? One more section to go over.
I'd be happy to transition on to the final group of programs. And then when we're done with that, if there's time, we can still take additional comments on any of the programs we've talked about tonight.
So we have, just to let the group know, we have Idalia who's raised her hand. So I'd like to, she hasn't participated yet. So maybe if we can ask Idalia and then we'll continue on the other section very briefly.
Sounds good.
Okay, Idalia. Okay, it looks like she lowered her hand. So Idalia, if you want to, okay, there she is.
Thank you very much. So my name is Idalia Rios and I'm just representing Santa Ana Building Haunted Communities. But with my hat of the Vela member, as a Vela member, just to give out a little bit of context, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, we were working with code enforcement because we had really bad conditions here in the Lacey neighborhood. And it turned out that most of the tenants that had issues with their apartments and the managers, and I can say that here in my building, 3 tenants were evicted because of code enforcement asking to fix the apartments. And that's how we were advocating at the time for just cause evictions. And then we had to stop working with code enforcement because a lot of tenants were getting evicted. And then that's how we started advocating and getting together, not just for just cause evictions, but for rent control. And that's how the movement started. So that means that before the pandemic time, we didn't have those protections for tenants. So I think this is I'm just glad that you guys are asking feedback to all of us, but we really need protection for tenants. And I know code enforcement, it's doing their work and they're doing the best they can, but I think we really have to work a little bit harder to really protect tenants, because both sides of the stories are important. Code enforcement needs to do their work, but the tenants, they have to remain in their apartments, because at the end of the day, we need each other. So how can we really go back and revise? And we want to keep code enforcement doing the work. We want to keep the tenants in their apartments. So let's just work together for the well-being of the residents and for the, well, I'm a tenant too. I'm a resident here in Santa Ana. So I think we just want to be well, and we want to remain in track. So I just
excellent. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Very well put. Thank you, Dalia. Melanie, let's go ahead and turn it to you to focus on the other segment, and then we'll go back to the sharing.
So we'll pass on the raised hand for now.
Yeah, it's Cesar Covarrubias. No, we'll get back to you, Cesar. I know we're working closely already, so if you can hold on. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. So we're down to, we're on third base, almost home. So the last grouping of programs to preserve neighborhood focus a little bit tighter on the historic preservation of some of our areas. So it touches on, we have a historic program and an ordinance that goes with that. We have a historic rehab incentive and our overall historic neighborhood program. So I'll touch on those in a little bit more detail. So we have an ordinance that created our Historic Resources Commission, and being able to put historic resources on a list for protection. And so we're implementing that as one of our objectives here. And part of that, it means identifying eligible historic properties, be they residential or otherwise, and even in some cases, preserve them through adaptive reuse, which means maybe they were an office, but they can be converted to residential so that they continue to have a life. And then related to that, our historic program effort, we've taken in this past year, 2020, 20 applications for what's called Mills Act agreements. And those are agreements where if there is a historic property, the state provided an incentive to preserve your historic home because it takes a little extra effort. And it allows for a reduction in your property taxes as sort of an exchange for that. And I'll just touch on the other two programs. As mentioned earlier, when we talked about the rehabilitation programs, there is one that's specifically tapped into the same kind of thing, but it's focused on historic homes. And it also has some requirements to participate. And we continue to offer that. And then last in the program number 15, we're trying to explore just different strategies to preserve some of our neighborhoods that have a special character and to help preserve that. And maybe not all the homes are on historic lists, but there's enough character and history and culture there that we want to preserve that. And so an action, the status related to that is that we are working with some neighborhood associations to assist them to look at some special design standards or historic designation. And that includes some neighborhoods. I'll just throw out one example, like Wilshire Square, as being considered a historically significant neighborhood so that their exterior outside improvements are in keeping with sort of the historic character to preserve that uniqueness that once it's gone, it's gone. So that's a little bit of an overview on preservation for some parts of our neighborhood, some parts of our community that have were constructed with historic periods and architecture. So with that, happy to open up to anyone that has some thoughts, suggestions, or experiences on these particular programs, on where we can improve or modify.
We'll start with Thrive Santa Ana. That might be Luis Sarmiento.
Yeah, this is Luis Sarmiento. Sorry for joining late. And this is definitely not my area of expertise. However, it does occur to me, that's just something that I would want to add, I think at this point in the conversation, is that we've worked with neighborhoods that have really significant historic value in our city, which I feel don't fall within the categories that you all are mentioning. And I'm thinking of, for example, in all of the area between, Bristol, between 5th Street, 1st Street, Walnut, Willits, are historically African-American neighborhoods, or were at some point. There are a few families that have fought really hard to lift up that history. And I don't see the city doing a really great job of honoring that and lifting up, not just by protecting homes, yes, protecting homes, but also creating, spaces within the city for community centers, cultural centers that lift up that history. I'm also thinking about, our collaborations with the Logan neighborhood, which is definitely a significant neighborhood, one of the oldest Latino neighborhoods in the county, I believe, if not in the city for sure, and others. And so more than protecting, I think these properties which are on a historic register, I think that historic preservation can include the lifting up of history, of communities that have contributed significantly to Santana. And I think also about the Native American communities, the Hashiman and Tongva peoples whose history is not recognized in our city.
So more of including an emphasis on the preservation of the cultures, honoring the cultures who were there previously, having some kind of a program or objective to include that. Okay.
And I'll just add really quickly, I know that I was late on the call, and someone was gracious enough to text me that there was some comments made earlier about the city's collaboration with the Land Trust, with Thrive, and definitely we do appreciate the collaboration of the city around the Walnut and Daisy parcel, but just putting out there that we would want to see a stronger commitment from the city in terms of not just the use of public land, but the use of the CLT model as a strategy, as a model that really puts development into the hands of community members in a way where we're stewarding the land in a way that that sees the land as something that we all need to take responsibility for. I think there's a lot more to say that I'll keep it at that for now, but just to say that we would want to see a stronger commitment. If we're talking about planning for the next however many years.
Okay, Luis, thank you very much. We're gonna go to Celica. Go ahead, Celica.
Okay, I have two suggestions. Once the home, like it's eligible to apply for a historical restoration, is there a possibility that the city can help help in the way of providing the permits at a low cost, like the restoration permits, instead of paying the full amount? Because it's going to be kind of costly for for the process of a home to maintain it historic. And also, can the permits be expedited or be put on a priority list for these types of properties? Because sometimes it takes really long to get the permits approved by the city. And so the longer that home stays vacant, you face the possibilities of it being vandalized. That's my comment.
Okay. I would see that as a recommendation, actually, Celica, about making sure the timeliness is much shorter and that it's more affordable to be able to do those, to move forward with those types of permits and improvements. Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Muy bien, thank you. Let's go to Dale Helvig. Go ahead, Dale.
You have to push star.
Yeah, *6. Thank you, Melanie. Dale, can you press pound 6 to unmute yourself? Okay, let's see. I will Okay, try it again. Dale, go ahead and speak.
I think he's trying to speak, but there's no sound
Okay,
coming.
we're not picking up on his audio. So
Dale, why don't you call back in while we go to
yeah.
that and then another raised hand. So try calling back in, Dale.
And we'll call you, Dale, once you connect. So if you want to join us again. Carla.
Thank you. I'll keep this brief. In regards to the historic preservation, I would like to recommend for the city to look at SB 1079. That's SB 1079, which is homes for homeowners and not corporations. Because one of the things that is like depleting our culture and our history is homeowners are no longer like selling homes like for family to family, but corporations are buying up a lot of it and are increasing the rents and evicting long-time residents that no longer are able to be able to stay and thrive in Santa Ana. So that's
Okay.
SB 1079. Thank you.
SB 1079, homes for homeowners. Thank you, Carla. Okay, Dale is back. And Dale, if you can press *6. Go ahead and talk.
Dale,
Yes.
Ward 3.
All right. Yes, you're on.
Good. I agree with an earlier speaker that's saying that we need to make the Mills Act available for all residents. Right now, I know it's been brought up before that the fees for the Mills Act application are probably the highest in the county, very high for the state. And if we reduce that, more people that are in the other areas of the city might be able to afford it, which would reduce their property tax and allow them to take the initiative to improve their property. But when they have to fork out, the $2,500 or more to get, $2,500, I think, for Mills Act, another $2,500 for a historical registry, it's a steep price to pay, and it's not conducive to getting people to apply. So hopefully we can take steps to reduce that fee, get more people into the program, protect the whole old homes in the city, and move forward with that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale.
Dale, just
and then
a quick comment. The fee on the initial designation was reduced by the city council last year, and I believe it's about $500. And so the fee of the Mills Act is, remains at the price you talked about, but the initial designation has been reduced. Just quick FYI.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dale. Before we continue, Melanie, there are just some comments. Maricela Castro was saying that Idalia's point regarding the fear that tenants have of being evicted because they report issues to code, to the city, doesn't just apply to the building, but with many more people in that neighborhood. And then Irlandia's comment about pointing out that historic preservation can pose a challenge for affordable housing development, and that sometimes historic preservation can be used as a way to deter development. And so, yeah, that's just her comment. And she supports the other comment about preserving our history and allowing for development. So back to you, Melanie.
Okay, thank you. So, so thank you for sharing on those 5 topics or 5 program themes. And again, we'll be taking your comments into consideration as we start to move forward for our community-wide input from the public. But we really appreciate your help to steer us at this point. And then we will be moving on to June 16th to a topic that's a little bit more concrete, if you will. It's regarding the housing supply, so new construction and diversity of housing, and a little bit about housing assistance. So we look forward to seeing you June 16th for that conversation. And then we'll take a Wednesday off and we'll come back and close out the roundtable, this segment of things with a conversation on special needs housing and affirmative fair housing considerations. And as we mentioned before, beyond the roundtable, we'll be putting out a housing survey for the community and having a community-wide forum as appropriate as COVID conditions keep evolving. And again, that's with the goal of getting our housing element and all of our analysis organized and put together for public hearings and adoption at the end of the year, essentially. That's our goal. So with that, if you have any questions or more comments, feel free to reach out. Our email, phone number, and the website is convenient there for you. And then again, our next roundtable will be the 16th. So thank you very much, and hope you can enjoy the rest of your evening while it's still sunshiny out there. Min, would you like to say any goodbyes?
Yes, thank you, Melanie, and I really appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Again, I think we had a really healthy discussion tonight on many issues, and we'll continue to take notes on some of these comments and concerns, and we'll certainly work to meaningfully address the comments in the way that our city approached to housing issue, resolving and addressing not only the concern of creation, access to affordable housing, but ensuring that we have high quality housing without impacting our residents. So thank you so much. Again, as I like to always say, please be safe and stay healthy. Good night, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.